Hi, this review is for Agatha Christie's The Big Four. I've got this rather nice old Fontana edition from 1978. The cover art, it tells us, is by Tom Adams. Most appropriate to the topic, and actually quite a pretty picture for and it's in and of itself. Language, Deborah, English. So Agatha Christie. Agatha Christie is one of those authors that everyone knows. But when you actually talk to people, you will often find that all these people who everyone knows her have never actually read any of her work. Or maybe they read one book once. More often, they have seen one of the numerous films that are based on her work. Most often, Death on the Nile, which has had, I don't know what, 4 or 5 movies and series. Or Death on the Orient Express. They seem to be the two that most often happen. Hercule Poirot, they seem to love making him into movies. I don't know why. Christie was pretty prolific. She had a large number of books, and yet they always seem to recycle the same one over and over again. And it's never one of my favourite books, I've noticed. It's always... Actually, maybe that's a good thing. Most movies and TV series mutilate the books I love, so it's probably just as well they've never done The Secret Adversaries, for example. Anyway, The Big Four, early in Christie's career. I don't have all of the Agatha Christie books, but I do have quite a few. And I do reread them, but I try not to reread them often. I don't think Christie is someone that you can reread every year with enjoyment. I think the story has to have faded in my mind a fair bit before I can enjoy reading them again. The Big Four, I believe I read many, many years ago. I had a couple of moments of vague familiarity, like a very faint ding-ding in my head as I was reading bits, but for the most part, I had forgotten it. Now, a thing that we need to mention more often, I feel, when we're discussing Agatha Christie is, aside from the whole Queen of Crime, now trademarked by her state, Dame Agatha as given by the Queen, rest in peace, she was contemporary with H.G. Wells, who I've just read. She was born in the 1800s, if I believe, I'm sure the internet will tell me. Yes, 1890. So basically, as an author, she started in the very early 1900s. She's 100 years old, resource. And this book in particular was first published in 1927. It is now 2024. In 3 years, this story will officially be 100 years old. And her writing reflects that, and her characters reflect that, and her plots also reflect that. They're incredibly varied, and they're in many ways contemporary with the now, if you don't include mobile phones, more than they were with her own time. So they were ahead of their times, in my personal opinion. All of this is my personal opinion. Now, what I didn't know until I was reading up on it after I'd finished it is that this novel, which features Hercule Poirot and his faithful dumb sidekick, Captain Hastings, what I didn't know was this actually started a series of short stories that, on the advice of, I think, her brother, she put together into one novel. I honestly would not have been able to tell. There's some books that you can tell have been pastiched together from short stories. In classic science fiction, especially, there's ones you read them and you know beyond a shadow of a doubt this was never meant to be a novel. It just kind of happened on suggestion of an editor. But this one, I think, holds together as a novel very well. And it's very unlike, I was about to say unlike most of her work, but that's one of the common misconceptions about Agatha Christie. I've got one friend, whenever Agatha Christie is mentioned, they roll their eyes and say the butler did it, completely failing to have read, I suspect, a single one of her books and not knowing how diverse her plots, her characters and her situations were. She's known for some more than others. Hercule Poirot, definitely. But this book is much unlike most of the Hercule Poirot. Hercule Poirot is most often called in on a case. Mysterious Death Styles, was that the first Poirot? I think it might have been. Not sure. I'm pretty sure it was definitely Christie's first published work, though. So he's called into a situation, and he's got often an English manor house, a whole heap of characters, blah, blah, blah. There was a murder, or there will be a murder, or something like that. This one is quite diverse. It starts off with Hercule Poirot's friend Captain Hastings coming back from South America where he's living with his wife. I feel like there was an actual book where he met his wife, who he likes to call Cinderella, and then marched off from Hercule Poirot's circle, but he came back. Obviously, Christie couldn't really see one without the other. There's that Sherlock Holmes and Watson type vibe between them. And there wouldn't really be a way to see Hercule Poirot's work except through someone who's too dense to understand what's happening. And that, unfortunately, is Captain Hastings. So Hastings comes back to surprise Poirot just as Poirot's about to get onto a boat to go to South America and surprise him. Instead, they end up staying in England when an unexpected visitor marches into Hercule Poirot's bedroom somehow. We never actually learn how he got in his bedroom. Is there something you're not telling us, Poirot? Anyway, he collapses and writes down the number 4 many times. Hastings jokingly calls it the mystery of the Big Four, and then the man starts to talk about this international crime cartel of 4 people. He describes the number 1 is a Chinese political mastermind called Lai Chang-yen. Number 2, he believes is American. Number 3 is a French woman. And number 4 is known only as the Destroyer. Da-da-da-da. Anyhow. So yes, to an extent, the novel is then a series of interconnected stories where Poirot and Hastings visit an informant who is meant to know a lot about China. And that ends up with a murder, probably by number 4. There's a discovery of incredible scientific prowess that leads to France and finding out who the French woman is. She's a scientist. And then Poirot somehow discovers the American, who is a millionaire. He sends Hastings to spy on him. But of course, Hastings doesn't know he's been set up as a patsy. That happens to Hastings a lot. And he always forgives it somehow. Anyway, then there's more deaths and various other things. Hastings is kidnapped. A whole heap of stuff happened. And at the end, of course, Poirot stages his own death. When this came out, that would probably have been quite a major thing. But we have now another dozen, I think, Hercule Poirot books. So we know it's not final. And succeeds in bringing down the Big Four eventually. It's a fun read. It's early Christie. I think, what number is it? It's one of the first half dozen that she got published, I believe. Her first was, I'm not even going to worry about figuring it out, but it is one of her early ones. So she isn't quite as disgusted with Hercule Poirot as a character. Now, Christie notoriously didn't like Hercule Poirot, and she abused him as a horrible little man or something like that. How horrible, terrible little bounder, something along those lines. And by the last Poirots, a dozen down, she's obviously dissatisfied with the character, not enjoying what she's writing, and the stories suffer. But here, she's not that quite relentlessly anti. She still pokes fun at him, but she does so in a fairly entertaining way. And the actual story has obviously had a lot of thought go into it. And I enjoyed it. I usually enjoy Agatha Christie's. There's only 1 or 2 that I haven't ever been able to get through. And they're fast, easy read. I suppose she was probably the originator of the cozy mystery or cozy thriller murder. Because they are cozy in that there's a sense of predictability in the experience you're going to have, if not in the actual plot. Right, in 3 years this will be 100 years old. Don't read it if you're not capable of reading old fiction, because it is beyond politically incorrect. I think the N-word appears at one stage, which wasn't a problem back in 1927, but is definitely a problem in 2024. There is ongoing racism. Of course, the name for the Chinese in that era is one that no one would find acceptable today. But in this early novel, Christie totally exhibits that dislike for every, okay, don't then, for every race that is not English. That insularity, which was almost a trademark of England for many years and part of probably how the British Empire came about. Slavs are disgusting people. Chinese are chinks. I hope that doesn't get me cancelled on YouTube, but her words, not mine. Anti-Semitic, racist, abusive, and has plenty of racial slurs. And some really, really odd words, phraseology, and concepts that would not fly today. However, over almost 100 years old, as I mentioned. So yes, it's suited for people who like reading older fiction. As in the origin, I suppose, of the cozy mystery, it's certainly got plenty to recommend it. And if you like Agatha Christie in general, I think The Big Four is a lot more fun than I remembered it being, simply because it's so atypical. The locations vary, there's a fair amount of travelling, there's a wide range of different characters and behaviours, and Hercule Poirot pulls some rabbits out of the hats that we don't see, I think, in any other book. Anyhow, that was Agatha Christie, The Big Four. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Finished it in less than 24 hours, so it's not an intensive read by any means. Thank you for watching. Comment if you feel like commenting, basically. See you next time.